Summer is supposed to be a time for rest, sun, and escape. But for these people, it turned into a nightmare they'll never forget. I never thought I needed a vacation until this summer. The past year had been a relentless grind. Work stress gnawed at me like a slow poison. Endless deadlines, impossible clients, and meetings that stretched late into the night. But it wasn't just the job. The weight of family drama hung over my head like a storm cloud. Arguments that never ended. Money slipping through my fingers faster than I could count, and nights so restless I could feel my heartbeat echoing in the dark. I remember one afternoon sitting at my desk, staring blankly at my computer screen while the world outside blurred into a dull hum. I couldn't even recall the last time I'd felt truly relaxed, truly free. My partner, always the hopeful one, noticed immediately. "We need to get out of the city," they said softly. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere away from everything." Their eyes held a calm conviction I couldn't argue with. So, after some searching, we found it. A small lake house tucked deep in the woods of northern Michigan. Remote, rustic, and just far enough away to promise no Wi-Fi, no emails, no noise. The day we left, the city was sweltering. Heat waves shimmered off the asphalt, horns blared incessantly. Voices shouted, construction rumbled. It was a chaotic symphony I was all too familiar with, and eager to escape. The car's windows rolled down, the air thick with exhaust and sweat, but as we drove north, the chaos slowly peeled away. Skyscrapers shrank, replaced by towering pines and oaks that formed a green tunnel above the road. The asphalt gave way to cracked blacktop, then gravel, and finally a narrow dirt road lined with wildflowers and thick moss. The scent changed too. The sharp, clean smell of pine needles mixed with damp earth and faint traces of wildflowers. The radio faded to silence. Only the soft chorus of birdsong and the whisper of wind through the branches remained. It felt like slipping out of time itself. After nearly 4 hours, the road ended at a gravel driveway. At the end stood the cabin, exactly as described in the listing. Weathered wooden boards with paint peeling away, windows clouded with dust and age, a sagging porch that creaked underfoot. It perched precariously at the lake's edge, the water dark and still, like a giant black mirror. As the sun dipped below the horizon, its last light ignited the surface in soft streaks of orange, pink, and purple, a breathtaking farewell to the day. Inside, the air was cooler, tinged with a faint mustiness, the scent of old wood, pine resin, and years untouched. The furniture was old but sturdy, some pieces draped with crocheted doilies or knit throws. The floorboards creaked with every step, and the windows rattled softly in the evening breeze. It felt like stepping back decades into a slower, quieter world. That first night, after a simple dinner, I stepped out onto the porch with a steaming mug of coffee. The cool night air bit gently at my skin, and the silence was profound. The lake lay calm and black, broken only by the occasional ripple of a fish surfacing. I breathed deeply, trying to soak in the peace I'd been craving for so long. But then I saw it, a faint flicker of light on the far shore. At first I thought maybe a campfire or a lantern from some late-night fisherman. But the light didn't dance or flicker naturally. It was steady, too constant, like a tiny orb suspended in space. "Do you see that?" I called to my partner, who was sitting just inside the door. They glanced out, shrugged. Probably some campers, but I couldn't shake the feeling. The light was wrong, too steady, too cold. The second night, the light had multiplied. What was once a single orb had become dozens, scattered like stars along the distant shoreline, hovering just beyond the trees. They blinked softly, in perfect unison, but never shifted or dimmed. "Campers with lanterns," my partner repeated, though their voice lacked conviction. Sleep became elusive. The stillness around the cabin thickened, almost suffocating. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt loaded, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something. I lay awake, eyes wide, listening to the gentle lap of water against the shore, and something else, faint crunches of leaves and twigs. One night, I heard it clearly. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving through the forest floor, just beyond the reach of the porch light. My heart hammered as I threw on a jacket and grabbed the flashlight. I swept its beam through the trees, but there was nothing, just shadows and darkness. Still, the feeling of unseen eyes watching me stayed, prickling against my skin like cold needles. Over the next few days, I found footprints in the dirt, large, uneven, sprawling, too big and oddly shaped to be human. They formed a messy circle around the cabin, as if some enormous creature had paced in the shadows. I took photos, but every image came out blurred or corrupted. It was as if the camera itself refused to capture the prints. The cabin seemed to breathe, alive with a restless energy. Shadows flickered oddly at the edge of my vision, shapes that didn't belong. My dreams, or maybe they were visions, were haunted by faceless figures standing silently at the tree line, glowing faintly in the dark. They never spoke, never moved toward me, only watched. On the last night, the shoreline erupted with light. Hundreds of tiny orbs floated just above the ground, blinking softly like ghostly lanterns, and among them moved figures. Tall, slender, impossibly thin, gliding silently between the trees. They didn't walk, they floated, limbs unnaturally long, faces blank voids glowing pale with an eerie light that illuminated the mist curling between the trunks. I bolted every door and window, heart pounding so loud it felt like it would burst my chest. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. The air around me felt thick, charged with something ancient and watchful. At dawn, the forest fell silent again. The footprints were gone, the lights vanished. The lake was calm, the world bathed in soft golden sunlight. We packed quickly, my partner trying to ease my nerves with reassurances about overactive imagination. But as I grabbed the keys from the front door, I noticed a message smeared across the weathered wood. You were never alone. The paint was cracked and peeling, old, hidden beneath years of dirt and neglect. I shivered. As we drove away, I felt an unsettling weight, like something had followed us, hitching a ride home. My partner laughed nervously, brushing off the unease. Then their phone buzzed with a notification. It was an old news article resurfaced by the algorithm. Local legend, mysterious disappearances around Lake Hollow. Dozens vanish without a trace every decade. Last recorded incident, exactly 10 years ago this summer. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Later, back in the city, I scrolled through the photos from our trip. The blurry footprints, the dark forests, and then I saw it. In every picture, hidden in the shadows. Countless pairs of glowing eyes, faint but unmistakable, watching us, watching me. And the worst part, I never told my partner about the footprints, the dreams, or the figures, because deep down, part of me isn't sure if any of it was real, or if it was all in my head. The vacation I thought would save me might have brought something home instead. I was broke. Not just your average, oops, forgot my wallet broke. I mean really broke. The kind of broke where instant ramen is your main food group, and every dollar has been stretched, folded, and counted more times than I can remember. At this point, I was beyond desperate. I was ready to take any job anywhere just to have something in my bank account. So when the email came through offering a summer job at a luxury resort with an all-expenses-paid package and a surprisingly generous paycheck, I almost couldn't believe it. The catch? It was in the middle of nowhere, on a sprawling property owned by a company no one seemed to have heard of. There was no phone number, no official website, just a detailed address tucked far away from any town or city. Desperation makes you overlook a lot. I drove for hours, the roads growing narrower, the trees closing in on either side like silent sentinels. By the time I pulled up to the resort, dusk was settling over the towering pines and rolling hills. The place looked like something out of a postcard, pristine pools gleaming under fading sunlight, perfectly manicured lawns stretching into the forest, and wooden cabins dotting the landscape, each with clean porches and rocking chairs. It should have felt like a dream come true, a break from the stress and grind of my life. Instead, it felt off. Inside the main lodge, I was greeted by the manager, a woman named Miss Lane. She was polite but reserved, with sharp eyes that never quite met mine for too long. She handed me a thin employee handbook. It looked hastily printed, with odd rules highlighted in red. No guests allowed past 10 p.m. Staff must remain within designated quarters during breaks. Report any unusual behavior or occurrences immediately. Never enter the forest after dark. Follow all instructions without question. The list went on. It was like the rules themselves were warning signs. I asked her about the guests. Do people stay long here? I said. She smiled thinly. Most guests leave before sunset. It's a quiet place, perfect for those who want to escape. Her tone was flat, but her eyes flickered with something I couldn't place. From the moment I arrived, Mark was the first person who tried to make me feel less like a stranger in that strange place. On the first day, after the grueling orientation and endless rule drills, I was exhausted and restless. The resort was so quiet it felt like the walls themselves were watching me. I found myself wandering near the staff quarters, just trying to get a breath of fresh air. Mark caught me standing awkwardly by the cabins, staring off into the tree line like I was hoping the forest would swallow me whole. "Hey," he said, flashing that overly bright smile, "you look like you could use a friend here." He introduced himself, and before I knew it, we were swapping stories about how we ended up at the resort. Mark had the same desperation, the same take-any-job attitude. We bonded quickly over our shared disbelief at how isolated and strange this place was. During breaks, we'd sneak to the far edge of the lawn, where the air was a little fresher and the weight of the place felt lighter. We talked about everything, our hometowns, dreams we had put on hold, and the creeping feeling that something was wrong here. Mark joked about the ghost stories, but there was a nervous edge beneath his humor. One night, after a particularly long shift, he confided in me, "You ever get the feeling this place isn't just a resort, like it's alive or watching us?" I nodded, feeling the same chill. That small moment of honesty sealed a fragile trust between us. He wasn't just a coworker, he was someone I could lean on in a place that felt more like a trap than a job. And that's why when he disappeared, I felt like a part of me vanished with him. The staff, the other employees, were strange too. They moved in quiet clusters, speaking in hushed tones and always glancing nervously over their shoulders. Their smiles never quite reached their eyes. I met a few others during training, Jenna, who kept to herself and looked exhausted, and Tom, who joked nervously about the weird stuff around the resort. They told me the resort was a great gig, clean facilities, good pay and free meals. But when I asked about guests staying overnight, their answers were vague. "Most just come for the day," Jenna said, avoiding my eyes. "You don't really want to be here after dark." The rules, I thought the strict rules were just management being overbearing. I figured the no guests after 10 p.m. was to prevent rowdy parties or damage to the grounds. But I started to notice other oddities. At dinner, empty chairs sat at tables where guests had clearly eaten earlier. Staff explained it away as guests leaving early, but no one ever seemed to actually see them go. The resort's internet was spotty, actually non-existent, and my phone barely got a signal. Calls home were impossible. I was cut off from the world. Strange sightings on my third night. While cleaning the lounge late after most guests had gone, I heard voices, soft murmurs drifting through the air like smoke. I crept to the window and looked out. Between the trees lining the property, shadowy figures moved. They floated rather than walked, their faces hidden beneath hoods or maybe just shadows. Their forms shimmered faintly, almost like they were made of smoke. I blinked. They vanished. A week in, things took a darker turn. Mark was my closest ally. We worked the same shifts, joked about the strange atmosphere, and planned to get through the summer together. One evening after dinner, Mark vanished. I waited for him to come back, but he didn't. I asked Miss Lane the next day, and she told me coldly, Mark left early. He went home, but Mark had no home nearby. When I pressed the other staff, they dodged questions or just said, "People come and go." I didn't buy it. One day, while cleaning an old storage closet, I found a battered leather journal tucked behind a loose panel. The handwriting inside was frantic, with dates and times scrawled in desperate strokes. It belonged to a former employee, who wrote about guests disappearing, strange lights in the woods, and warnings about the resort's history. The resort, it said, was built on the site of an old compound, something ancient and dark, sealed beneath the grounds. The guests were offerings. I made my decision. I couldn't stay another day. I packed a small bag, ready to leave at dawn. But that night the power cut out. The emergency lights flickered on, casting long, eerie shadows through the halls. I heard footsteps outside my room, slow, deliberate. A voice whispered through the darkness, almost a hiss. "Follow the rules." I slammed the door, hard hammering. Then I ran. The front doors were locked tight, no way out. I tried the back exit. As I pushed it open, a cold wind swept past. Then I saw them, those same glowing, shadowy figures from the woods, standing between me and freedom. Their eyes pierced the darkness, unmoving, watching. I froze. That's when it hit me. The paycheck wasn't a reward, it was bait. They paid too well to make sure you'd stay. And if you tried to leave, well, some people disappear, some become part of the resort. Now I'm writing this down, hoping someone finds it, hoping someone knows the truth before it's too late. If you ever get an offer like mine, think twice, because the summer job that pays too well might just cost you everything. "2022 summer was something else. Our family decided to rent a lake house for a week, a chance to escape the city noise, screens, and non-stop rush, and to reconnect with each other. Mom was desperate for fresh air and open spaces. Dad was hoping to find some peace by fishing in the early mornings, and I just wanted to get away from school stress, deadlines, and all the noise in my head. Jamie, my little brother who was 6 years old, was thrilled about being near the water, his favorite place in the world where he could run wild and free. The lake was even more beautiful than I'd imagined. It stretched wide and calm, its surface glassy and perfectly still, reflecting the towering pine trees that formed a dark green wall around the shore. Every evening, the sun slipped slowly behind the hills, painting the sky with fiery oranges, reds, and deep purples, a breathtaking, almost surreal kind of beauty. It felt like stepping into a postcard or a dream, the kind of place where worries should melt away. But there was something we couldn't ignore. A year before our arrival, a boy named Ethan had drowned in that very lake. The news had spread quickly but faded just as fast from headlines. Yet the locals still whispered about it with hushed voices. Ethan was about Jamie's age, a lively boy who loved adventure and swimming. One careless moment, one slip beneath the water at the old dock, and he never came back up. His parents left town soon after, unable to bear the memories. The dock became a place no one dared to visit, a silent monument to tragedy, coated with fear and grief. From the moment we arrived, Jamie behaved oddly. Normally he would run around, shouting and laughing, but now he was unusually quiet. He spent hours just staring out at the lake, his small face serious and almost sad. Sometimes he'd slip away quietly to explore on his own, talking softly to himself or the trees or the water. It was impossible to tell. At first we thought it was just his imagination running wild. Kids make up invisible friends all the time, right? But then Jamie began to say things no child should know. One afternoon, as Dad set up his fishing gear near the dock, Jamie tugged on his sleeve, eyes wide and steady. "Do you see him, Dad? The boy in the water?" Jamie asked quietly. Dad looked at him, puzzled, and chuckled nervously. "No, Jamie, there's no one there," but Jamie shook his head. "He's right there. His name is Ethan." That night, I was awakened by the soft sound of whispering. I quietly crept out of bed and peeked through the doorway into the living room, where Jamie sat cross-legged on the floor, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Why did you drown, Ethan? Why won't you come back?" he asked. His words sent a chill through me. A child talking to someone invisible, pleading for answers to a terrible mystery. The next day, Jamie told us things about Ethan, details that none of us knew. How Ethan loved collecting shiny rocks from the shore, how he was terrified of thunderstorms, how he had a scar above his left eyebrow from a bike accident. Mom and Dad exchanged worried glances. "Where did you learn all that?" Mom asked gently. Jamie shrugged. "Ethan told me." As the days passed, Ethan's presence seemed to grow stronger. Jamie said Ethan warned him to avoid certain parts of the lake, especially the old dock where he drowned. He cautioned Jamie against strangers and told him never to swim alone. But sometimes Jamie's calm would break, and fear would flicker in his wide eyes. One evening, while we sat around the campfire roasting marshmallows, Jamie suddenly froze, his gaze locked on the woods beyond the lake, his lips barely moving. "He's here," Jamie whispered. I scanned the dark tree line, but all I saw was shifting shadows and the gentle sway of the pine branches in the breeze. That night the cabin felt colder, an icy chill that crept deep into my bones. I was jolted awake by the sound of water dripping somewhere in the dark. When I got out of bed to check, the lake was perfectly still, and Jamie's bed was empty. Fear clawed at my chest as I searched every corner of the house, my voice trembling as I called his name. Finally, I found him standing at the edge of the dock, eyes wide and staring into the inky black water. He was talking to someone only he could see. "Ethan says I have to jump," Jamie whispered, his voice hollow. I grabbed his arm, heart pounding. "No, Jamie, don't listen. You have to come back inside." He looked at me, confusion mixing with something darker, fear, maybe anger, then smiled in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. "You don't see him, but I do." From that night on, every moment was filled with dread. Jamie clung to us, but often he would slip away to the water's edge, whispering, asking questions, or staring silently into the dark lake. Sleep became impossible. I lay awake at night, listening to Jamie's quiet conversations in the dark, his voice sometimes scared, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry. One evening, he suddenly shouted out, "Stop it, leave me alone." But the only answer was the wind rustling through the pine trees, leaving and lingering shadows. When it was finally time to leave, we packed up as fast as we could. Jamie stopped talking about Ethan, and for a while we thought the nightmare was over. But on the long drive back to the city, I caught Jamie murmuring in his sleep, "Wait for me." Weeks later, Jamie's teacher called to check on him. She mentioned he had grown quieter, distracted, sometimes staring at empty corners, as if someone unseen was there. One day, Jamie drew a picture at school. It was of the lake, and in the water, next to the dock, a small figure stood smiling, a boy with a scar above his left eyebrow. Underneath in shaky handwriting, Jamie had written, "I'm coming back soon." It's been almost 2 years now since that summer at the lake. Jamie, well, he's okay, mostly. The strange talks have stopped, and he's back to being a normal kid most days. But there's still something different about him. He sometimes stares off into space, as if listening to someone only he can hear. And we never go anywhere near a lake or beach during the summer anymore. Summer has become a quiet, boring time for us. No vacations, no trips to the water. We just stay at home, trying to forget the shadows that lingered by that lake. Sometimes I wonder if Ethan really is still out there, waiting for Jamie to come back. And if one day, Jamie will listen again. If you love hearing true spooky stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to Whispers Horror for more chilling tales that will keep you up at night. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload, because sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that actually happened.